What's up, guys? This is Kephas.
Welcome to SBA Spotlight. In these videos, I'll be covering how well the single button assistant performs for each spec, what it does well, where it falls short, and how to get the most out of it, especially if you're looking for a lower stress or more accessible way to play. So whether you're here to relax, overcome a limitation, or just see how far one button can take you, I've got you covered. Alright, so let's talk about the single button assistant and how it's working out for Demonology Warlocks. This was an interesting one, and I always like to start these videos off by referencing the Wowhead article. Just as a reference point, they estimate about a 17% loss to optimal DPS potential on a target dummy, and based on those numbers, that's honestly not bad. In my view, anything above 75%, certainly anything above 80% is pretty good for what the single button assistant is. And honestly, when you look at everything that this thing manages for Demonology, it's actually pretty impressive. You have a number of cooldowns that you use as a Demonology Warlock, and the good news is that the single button assistant uses pretty much every single one of them. Everything from Demonic Strength to Summon Vile Fiend, Grimoire Felguard, and even your Bombers, which is a ground targeting ability. The single button assistant has you covered. It'll even summon your Felguard if you don't have him out already, including when he dies, so that's very useful. But I'm very surprised at everything that's covered here, even Power Siphon. Most classes don't get this lucky having so many of these longer cooldowns covered by the SBA. And then when you look at your core rotation, of course, it's going to use Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt to generate your soul shards, which means that you don't have to worry about demonic cores. It will use Hand of Gul'dan when you have 3 or more soul shards, so you don't have to worry about soul shards. And of course, it will prioritize things like Call Dreadstalkers and all of your other major cooldowns over your basic rotation. So it's managing pretty much everything for you with the exception of 2 abilities, and they are Implosion and Summon Demonic Tyrant. And when you consider how these abilities work, it kind of makes sense. You only use Implosion in AoE situations to send your demons on a kamikaze mission to deal damage to multiple targets. It makes sense that the single button assistant isn't going to be able to manage this one effectively. So you are going to have to manage this one yourself, but honestly, it's really not all that hard to do. Just pay attention to how many demons you have out and use Implosion accordingly. It also makes sense that the single button assistant doesn't use Summon Demonic Tyrant, though it does complicate things a little bit. The whole point of summoning your Demonic Tyrant is to extend the life of all of your other demons, and primarily you're trying to line it up with your Vile Fiend. Now, the single button assistant will summon your Vile Fiend for you, so you're going to have to keep track of when that happens and then summon Demonic Tyrant near the end of your Vile Fiend's lifespan. So you're going to have to pay attention a little bit. There might be a tracker that you can use, or you could create your own somehow, maybe through Weak Ores or something, but basically you summon out your Demonic Tyrant near the end of your Vile Fiend's lifespan, and then by the time Vile Fiend is ready again, that version of your Vile Fiend will die and you'll be able to resummon him, and you'll basically be able to keep your Vile Fiend out for about 45 seconds each Demonic Tyrant cycle. That's generally the idea of how you're trying to summon your Demonic Tyrant and get the most out of it, ideally along with other demons that you're summoning out like Dreadstalkers, Grimoire Felguard, and as many imps as possible. So these abilities are going to have to be managed separately, and you will have to pay attention a little bit if you want to get anything out of them. Now, I'd be interested to hear how other people feel who have used the single button assistant with Demonology, but for me, I'm first off very impressed with how many things it's managing. It's definitely making it a lot easier to play a Demonology Warlock, but in terms of how it feels when I'm pressing the button, it just kind of feels a little bit clunky to me, and I'm not entirely sure why. I definitely think that the longer cooldown penalty is punishing Demonology a little bit more, because it's all about building up this demonic army and getting the most out of it. And if you're slowed down ever so slightly between each spell cast, it can definitely be a bit of a problem, though Demonology isn't as affected by it because you have so many casting abilities, so it's not nearly as bad. But with all of these longer cooldown abilities that you have, it does feel a little bit weird. One of the biggest problems with Demonology is trying to line up all your demons for Demonic Tyrant and then just trying to keep track, like I said, primarily with Vile Fiend. The thing about the single button assistant is that it uses abilities when they're available. It doesn't think about where you are in a fight, how many enemies there are, if you're at the beginning of a fight, if you're at the end of a fight. You could be at the end of a fight and it will blow all these cooldowns. And that's not always ideal because then you have a bunch of demons standing there doing nothing, waiting for the next pack of trash, or you're starting the boss fight with all of your cooldowns not available. That can definitely be a bit of a problem. And so you kind of have to, I guess, take the good with the bad there, because that's just how the single button assistant works. And I think that Demonology kind of highlights a bit of this nuance where we talk about testing things on a target dummy versus how things actually work in real content, where things can be a lot more inconsistent. Though when it comes to less intense content that isn't cutting edge or whatever, this really isn't going to matter all that much. In most of the dungeons and groups I was running in, I had no problem keeping up with everybody else, and it really wasn't all that big of a deal. I've heard from a lot of people who have used it that it just feels nice to be able to play Demonology and not struggle as much. Very similar to what I was hearing from people who were enjoying playing Feral Druid with a single button assistant. I think that Demonology is just a very popular Warlock spec. It feels really good to summon up an army of demons and run around with them, and it certainly will allow you to do that very easily using the single button assistant. Like I said, the damage isn't too bad for Demonology, though the ceiling is much higher than what the single button assistant is able to do. And that's very good news for players who want to put their skills to the test, avoid using the SBA, and go farther. Aside from that, it might not feel as responsive as it does for other classes, just in terms of pressing buttons and seeing numbers fly out, because a lot of what you're doing is summoning things. But once you get a handle on that, and also just keeping track of when to summon your Demonic Tyrant, I think it'll slowly start to feel a little bit more natural. And that's pretty much everything I've learned for now. But as always, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of the single button assistant, and how is it working out for you so far? Let me know in the comments. But with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.